Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News. Merry Christmas to everyone tuning in from the Al Arabiya team. These are our top stories. US authorities find over 1 million new Jeffrey Epstein documents set for release in the coming weeks. The Kremlin is reviewing the US-backed Ukraine peace plan as a Russian port suffers a drone attack. And Pope Leo celebrates Christmas Mass at St. Peter's Basilica and speaks out on Gaza's suffering. Now, US authorities have uncovered over 1 million additional documents potentially linked to Jeffrey Epstein, with plans to release them in the coming weeks. The Justice Department is reviewing the files to protect victims before publication. Lawmakers have criticized delays and heavy redactions, while prior document releases have implicated prominent figures connected to Epstein's network. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by correspondent Jagruti Dave. Jagruti, thank you so much for joining me today. So another day and more news about the Epstein files. What is the Department of Justice saying about these new documents?
Yeah, it's another day and yet more defending from the Department of Justice. It's facing a lot of criticism about how it's handled these files in the past. And now what it's saying in a social media post on X is that the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the FBI have informed the Department of Justice that they have uncovered over 1 million more documents potentially related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, they didn't say when the Department of Justice received these documents, but they're saying that they are reviewing them for release. The law means that they they are able to redact any information that could expose the identity of victims or that could be sensitive to ongoing federal investigations. So they're in the process of reviewing and redacting these latest tranche of documents that they say they've received. They say in that post that we have lawyers working around the clock and we will release the documents as soon as possible. Due to the mass volume of material, this process may take a few weeks. So yet more delays, and media reports here in the US are saying that there are around 200 lawyers that have been recruited to work on the redactions here. But also, according to media reports, that this number is not enough, that they're asking lawyers to volunteer to stay over the holiday period to try to work on these latest documents as fast as possible to try to get them out, because there's obviously a lot of pressure on the DOJ to release these. They've already missed that Friday deadline, last Friday, given by the law enacted by Congress to release the full documents. So a lot of pressure on the Department of Justice. And yet now they're saying that they have got potentially more than 1 million more documents to review.
And as the Epstein files have been released, the DOJ and the Trump administration has been accused of a cover-up. Why have we seen so much intense criticism because of the documents that have been released already?
I think a lot of experts are saying that it's that the administration has really hamstrung themselves by the manner of the release, the way that they've handled it. They've effectively made the situation a lot worse for themselves because of confused messaging, mixed messaging. So, if we go right back from the start, Donald Trump said he was in favor of releasing the Epstein files, the so-called Epstein files, on the campaign trail. A lot of his supporters really, really want these documents out in the public domain. But then he went back on that and didn't really push for the release of those files. And then the pressure mounted, and then he had to do a U-turn. One of his most loyal supporters, Marjorie Taylor Greene, went against the president because of the delays by the Department of Justice on getting these files out in the open. They've broken, she's broken with the president on this and other issues. So this has been a real thorn in the administration side and President Trump's side. And In the latest series of documents that we've seen, we've had 10,000 released earlier in the week. We've now got these more than a million that are being, a million more that are being reviewed. And in these earlier documents, the way that the some administration officials were messaging, on the one hand, some of those implicated for some of those mentioned in the documents, for example, Bill Clinton administration officials went hard on making a big deal about this. But then in other documents that mentioned Donald Trump, they said, some of these don't take these with a pinch of salt. Not all the documents are true. Some of them are fake. Some of them are fabrications. Now, it has to be said, mention of a name in these documents does not mean that they are implicated in any wrongdoing. Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, they have not been accused of doing anything wrong. Donald Trump has repeatedly said he has no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein, his activities. He said that he used to be friends with him back when they were in Palm Beach, but that he broke friendship with him before his first arrest, describing Epstein as a creep. So despite all of this, it's this mixed messaging, it's the delays, there was a series of documents that were released and then they were pulled back and then released back again. It's unclear why this happened. So all of this is leading to a lot of confusion and a lot of people leaving room for those accusations that there's something underhand going on. And along with the First Lady, Melania Trump, President Donald Trump took calls from multiple children. Let's just take a listen to one of those calls right now, Jagruti.
What would you like Santa to bring?
Not coal.
Not coal. No, you don't want coal. Well, coal is, you mean clean, beautiful coal. I had to do that, I'm sorry. No, coal is clean and beautiful. Please remember that.
So, Jagruti, the child clearly touched a nerve when it came to coal. What more can you tell us about that phone in that he had?
Yeah, this is an absolutely intriguing tradition that Donald Trump and the First Lady have taken part in. Another example of a rather odd conversation with a child was when Donald Trump talked about, a child asked, "Where's Santa?" And Donald Trump talked about, we need to check that Santa's good. We don't want him being infiltrated. With Santa could be a bad Santa, but no, we know that Santa's good now. And all of this is this very odd sort of injection of politics into this Christmas tradition, talking to children about, Santa being infiltrated, about coal being clean coal. It's just an indication that, even in the Christmas tradition, even in the Christmas period, politics is not far from the president's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually quite an amazing phone-in, and it was almost entertaining to watch. Jagruti Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. At least 5 people have died in a bomb blast at a mosque in northeastern Nigeria's Borno state. The packed mosque was targeted in the attack, which also left 35 people injured. No group has claimed responsibility. 11 suspects have been arrested in connection with a mass shooting at a tavern in South Africa that did leave 9 people dead. Authorities say 9 of those who were arrested are Lesotho nationals, while 1 is from Mozambique. Turkey has arrested more than 100 suspected ISIS members believed to be planning attacks during the holiday season. Authorities say 115 were taken into custody, with 22 others detained following intelligence of potential Christmas and New Year plots, according to the Istanbul's prosecutor's office. A powerful winter storm is battering California with heavy rain, strong winds and mountain snow. Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency for multiple countries, including Los Angeles and San Diego. Forecasts warn of flash floods and mudslides, especially in areas still recovering from last year's wildfires. At least 1 person has died in a weather-related crash in Sacramento County. And finally, Nazareth Ashura has won the presidential election in Honduras. This comes after weeks of delays following technical problems and allegations of fraud. The Conservative National Party candidate is backed by US President Donald Trump and won the 40.3% of that vote. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the Kremlin is reviewing documents on a possible end to the war in Ukraine brought by US envoy Kirill Dmitriev. This comes as 2 oil tanks at Russia's Tarique port caught fire after a reported Ukrainian drone attack. Washington and Kyiv had made progress on a peace plan, with Kyiv securing key concessions before sending it to Moscow. For more on this, I'm joined by correspondent Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin with the Kremlin says Russia is analysing US documents on the Ukraine peace deal and that Putin has sent Christmas wishes to President Donald Trump. Is this a positive signal that the deadlock in talks could now possibly be broken?
Well, it is very difficult to say whether the deadlock could be broken without Russia making sure that its red lines are well observed in the document that is on the table, because at the moment we understand that Moscow is analyzing the proposals that have been brought by its economic envoy Kirill Dmitriev. Those proposals were discussed between him and the American representatives over the past weekend in Miami. And according to what we have heard from the Ukrainian leader, it does seem that Moscow won't be satisfied by some of the provisions of that document. So Russia says now that the Russian president will be making his assessment, and given what he says, Russia will decide on further steps when it comes to the negotiations. And obviously Russia sending the Russian president sending celebrations on Christmas to the US President Donald Trump is a positive sign, but that is far from being decisive. At this stage, we understand that Russia will be making sure that its red lines are well observed and taken into account. One important thing to take into consideration here is that Russia is making more gains on the ground, and that is something that Moscow always reminds of to the Western partners of Kyiv. And obviously there are fears in Moscow that the loan has just recently been given by the European Union to Kyiv is not something that is designed to bring Kyiv to the negotiating table. Instead, this is something that encourages the Ukrainians to continue the fighting.
And Zelenskyy has hinted that Ukraine is planning to offer Russia the potential withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the east. Is this something that President Putin is now willing to agree on and possibly make concessions?
Well, what we know from Russia is that the territorial issue is one of the core at the negotiating table. Moscow saying that it has new regions enshrined in its constitution, and what they want to see is the withdrawal of the Ukrainian troops from all of those territories, something which has been a non-starter for Ukraine in its turn. And also we are hearing from the Kremlin that it will be of negotiations and negotiators' work to talk about concessions that have to be made, because we know that Russia has been making gains on other directions in Ukraine, regions such as Sumy region, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv region. All of those territories are not on the Russian constitution. So the suggestion from the political observers here is that there are ways to negotiate. But again, this will be up to the negotiators and the art of diplomacy, whether they can agree on that or not. The pressing issue here is that how far the sides will be willing to continue this shuttle diplomacy that is being conducted by the United States, with many political analysts here wondering and saying that the US has to be the strong side that should be deciding in favor of one of the sides. They can't be that swing vote that flip-flops between the two.
And it's really interesting because you say to me Russia is making more gains on ground at the moment, and that's something that President Putin is reminding everybody of. But I find it quite interesting that in his Christmas Eve address, Zelenskyy wished Putin would perish, and that says Ukraine has taken full control of the Kupiansk region and also of the Tarique port that we've seen. So Ukraine is fighting back at the moment. And I don't know what you think of the situation that Russia is facing, because they are having some targeted attacks back at them.
Indeed, there are attacks by Ukraine. Those are the attacks carried out normally with the drones against, including civilian targets on the Russian territory. And indeed, they are persistent. But interestingly, we've heard over the past couple of weeks, the Russian MOD officials giving the briefing to the Russian president, saying that Russian air defenses are now dealing much better, 75% better, with preventing those attacks from taking place, with interception of the drones, interception of the missiles. So the radio electronic warfare as well as air defense systems are more sophisticated in Russia at this stage. As for the territorial gains, we've heard the Russian president last week during his Q&A session speaking about those gains and the Ukrainian counterclaims about them holding the territories which Russia had previously claimed as being captured by Russia. And President Vladimir Putin has been saying that this is simply not true, that Ukraine is misleading the Western partners, and that narrative coming from Ukraine is just to convince the Western partners that the Ukrainians are still doing fine on the battlefield. Again, this is obviously subject of the Ministry of Defense, something that they will have to be commenting on. But for now, we are hearing from the MOD, at least here on the Russian territory, that they are making gains without ceding the territories that I had previously captured to Ukraine back.
And it's really interesting because the Pope is actually urging Russia and Ukraine to find courage for direct talks. The Pope has been, of course, speaking today on Christmas Day. Do you think it's possible that we could ever see Putin and Zelenskyy finding the courage to meet each other in the same room?
Well, we've heard repeatedly from the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelenskyy, that he wants to sit down with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. And Putin has been in his turn saying that he is ready for such a summit, but only when there is something to be agreed upon, when all of the details are finalized, not as some interim meeting that he is ready to have. But also, interestingly, we are hearing a lot from Russia about Ukrainian president's legitimacy. The Russians are casting doubt that Zelenskyy is the president who will be able to sign on any of the documents. They will be in doubt and they will be in question, according to Moscow's narrative, in the future. And this is something that the Western countries could further be using to derail any of those arrangements and to say that they are null and void. And also, we are hearing some very strong statements from the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelenskyy, about Putin wishing him to perish. And to that, the Kremlin has been saying that this is uncultural, angry, and shows that the Ukrainian leader has little adequacy. So Russia is casting doubt on whether Zelenskyy is, in his turn, actually able to negotiate. So it is very difficult to see in the foreseeable future how the two leaders could be sitting down face to face.
Dasha Chernyshova, great to have you back on the show with me. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, the son of former Bangladeshi Prime Minister and frontrunner in the country's upcoming parliamentary elections has ended a 17-year exile and has returned home. Experts say Tarique Rahman's arrival signals a major shift in the South Asian nation's political landscape, as Patrick Falk reports.
In
a Facebook post on Thursday, Tarique Rahman wrote, "Finally, Sylhet, on the soil of Bangladesh." Despite living in exile for nearly 2 decades, the 60-year-old's influence over Bangladesh's opposition politics remains strong. He's the acting chairman of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and has been based in London since 2008. The eldest son of ex-President Zia Rahman, who was assassinated in 1981, and former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia, he joined the BNP in 1988 and rose to prominence as its senior joint secretary in 2002. But he was detained on corruption charges during an anti-graft drive in 2007 brought during a military-backed interim government, charges he rejected as bogus. The following year, he left the country for medical treatment and hasn't returned until now. From London, he continued to shape BNP's strategy, addressing rallies via video calls and meeting party leaders abroad. Authorities dropped all charges against Rahman following the fall of the Awami League government last year. In January, he reunited with his mother at Gatwick Airport after more than 7 years apart. Khalida Zia had been under house arrest but was given permission to receive medical treatment abroad. But Rahman's return comes at a fragile moment. A mass uprising that ousted Sheikh Hasina a year ago has left the country under an interim government. Earlier this month, a key figure in that student-led movement was shot in the head by masked assailants while launching its campaign for the election due in February. Sharif Osman Hadi's death has prompted a wave of unrest in the country. Rahman is expected to contest in a traditional stronghold in northern Bangladesh. Speaking to party members earlier this week, he warned difficult times lie ahead, so we must all remain united. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Pope Leo has celebrated Christmas morning Mass today at St. Peter's Basilica, becoming the first pope to do so since Pope John Paul, then second more than 30 years ago. In his sermon, Leo drew attention to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, calling for compassion. The new pope highlighted the struggles of the homeless worldwide and the destruction caused by the war ahead of his traditional blessing, which will happen later today. For more on this, I'm joined from Rome by journalist Alina Trabattoni. Alina, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me. First of all, what stood out from last night's Mass, and what does Leo's approach tell us about what kind of pope he wants to be?
Well, Leigh-Ann, great to be speaking to you about this because it's really, really interesting. I have to say that it was Pope Leo's first Christmas Mass, and it all stood out, from the rain to the crowds, to the atmosphere in the Basilica, to his calls for peace and for unity across the world. And yesterday, incredibly, when thousands of people could not fit into the Basilica for Christmas Eve, for the traditional midnight Mass, and the weather was absolutely stormy and wet and cold, he got up and went outside before the Mass, and he was walking around with an umbrella and greeting the pilgrims in Italian and English, apologizing that St. Peter's wasn't big enough to hold all the crowds that were present, telling them to take courage. He stood there in the rain with them, and people on the ground told me that's a very, very powerful image that they have, a memory they will be carrying with them for the rest of their life for a very long time. And today, of course, he restored something, as you said, he restored something that had not been seen for 30 years in the Catholic Church, a full Christmas Day Mass, starting at around 10 a.m. this morning. The Basilica packed again, St. Peter's Basilica packed again. A Pope saying that liturgy physically in the heart of the city, in the heart of the Vatican city, not just on screens. That's something we have not seen for a very long time across Italy, across the Vatican, across the world for Catholic believers. And this choice of presence over distance shapes his message, and everyone feels shapes things that will come after. At least that's according to Vatican experts I've been speaking to. And in his homily, in the Ubi et Orbi address, Pope Leo didn't hide behind the doctrine. He named suffering directly, and he talked about Gaza, about the Ukraine, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel. everything was in his mind, on his mind, as he was, giving the homily. And he drew people verbally into the tents at Gaza. Tents, he said, were exposed to rain, wind and cold, echoing the pilgrims that had stood with the night before in St. Peter's Square in the cold and the rain and the wind. And he talked about young people forced to take up arms, and the difficulty they were facing in doing this. But what cut deepest, and I'm sorry, it was such a powerful moment that, I could talk a lot about it, but I will wind up quickly. But what cut deepest was this, his comment on, human flesh asking for care. He went beyond theory and he went very much on the ground with the people, and, asking those present to be grateful, to be helpful, and to take action in terms of calling for ceasefires, peace, and so forth.
Alina, like you just said to me, this was a different Mass today. Today's full Christmas Mass we haven't seen in a really long time, of course. But, I've just been listening to you speaking to me, and I was watching the Pope deliver his message. And, of course, he spoke about Ukraine. He spoke about the plight in Gaza. Do you think he is becoming a really political Pope?
Well, in a sense, yes, but his action is slightly different from his predecessors in that he's not calling on the governments to take action. In the sense, his message goes to the governments as well, but he's very much leveraging Catholic believers' sense of responsibility. So he's really positioning himself to be a moral force in the current geopolitical situation, but without delving and getting completely immersed in day-by-day politics. And this came across in many ways. He spoke about Yemen, Mali, Burkina Faso, and, he equally pointed out that or the message that was transmitted and also that has been analyzed by Vatican experts is that he's calling on activists and Catholic believers to take action and to contribute towards resolving some of these problems, to calling for ceasefires, to contributing to working towards, people putting down their arms, to taking in immigrants. He even called on, people living in prison that are living in inhumane conditions to be helped and supported, the unemployed as well. And he framed peace as something that begins when people change. So when Catholic believers change, not when governments take action top down. It's a very grassroots message that he was coming across with. And he's positioning Catholics and the Catholic Church, of course, as a moral force that really can't be ignored because just due to the sheer volume of Catholic believers across the world. And the real impact of his message, it's going to be, according to many of the experts I've spoken to, on Catholic activists, on workers, on diplomats, and politicians as well, who are Catholic. We have a lot of high-profile politicians who are Catholic across the world, and now they have a pope giving them moral permission to resist, to question, to act. And, going back to the reign of yesterday, it's now part of the message. A pope in the weather with pilgrims locked out versus a pope in the Basilica, detached from the masses and the pilgrims. And, his message calling for justice for the homeless, dispossessed, and those that are suffering today was very, very strong.
And Alina, while you've been talking to me and while you've been on screen, we can see those beautiful pictures of the Pope inside the Basilica. And it's always a really emotional time for the whole Catholic community, of course, the 25th of December. But you are in Italy yourself, you're close to the Vatican. What's the broader significance of Leo's first Christmases for audiences like me? I'm a Catholic and I'm beyond the Vatican, of course. Well,
I think really the real message here is that his style is going to be different. It's going to follow in the wake of his predecessors, because obviously the objective is always the same, but his style is definitely different. Different from Pope Francis. Pope Leo quoted him actually during the Christmas celebrations. Pope Francis was expansive, almost pastoral in trying to embrace the whole world's pain at the same time. And different from Pope Benedict, he was an intellectual, theological, speaking to the mind. Pope Leo is something else. He's lyrical, but he's very direct. He uses poetry. He cited poetry during the Christmas celebrations, and then he cuts straight to the bone. Structurally, his approach is much, much tighter. What we can say is that, compared to Pope Francis, who was all embracing, who would spiral outwards and try and, reach out to everyone at the same time, touching on everything, Pope Leo moves in circles. His masses, his approaches move in circles, going deeper each time. They all end with the same theme, really. It all boils down to opening our hearts up to those in pain, and that this, for Catholic believers, transforms them into children of God. Here's what's most striking, and I think a lot of people will be taken away from these Christmas festivities, both analysts and experts, but also believers, pilgrims, and let's not forget, this year is Jubilee year in Italy. It's a 1 in a 25-year occurrence, and there's a huge inflow of pilgrims from all over the world. Leo restored the full Christmas Day Mass in St. Peter's, as we were saying earlier, for the first time in 30 years. And that's not really style, if you think about it. It's actually infrastructure. He's saying the Pope's physical presence, the Pope's body should be in the Basilica, and that it matters. And it shouldn't just be his word on screens. It should be him physically celebrating Mass. And that's very different from his predecessor's approach to the papacy itself. And also, the rain yesterday was very, very symbolic, and that made it very clear. When he walked out to address those locked out of the Basilica, he wasn't performing charity. He was showing that a pope in the rain, talking to the crowds, is more important than staying dry in the Basilica. So I think in a nutshell, that's Pope Leo's style, and that's what the message is going to be coming out of these Christmas festivities. It's presence over words. Flesh over abstraction, as he himself said. Responsibility over blame.
Alina Trabattoni, Merry Christmas, and thank you so much for speaking to me and looking at those beautiful images and all the analysis of the Pope's Mass today. Thank you. Now, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has shared a special Christmas moment with her daughter, Princess Charlotte, a festive piano duet broadcast to millions across the UK. The performance, recorded at Windsor Castle, opened this year's Together at Christmas service at Westminster Abbey. Take a quick listen.
At its heart, Christmas speaks of love taking form in the simplest, most human ways. Not in sentimental or grand gestures, but gentle ones. A moment of listening, a word of comfort, a friendly conversation, a helping hand, presence. These simple acts of care might seem small, but they contribute to the beautiful tapestry of life to which we all belong.
Meanwhile, in the US, President Donald Trump marked Christmas Eve with a call-in tradition to NORAD, chatting with children about Santa, cookies, and what they hope to find under the Christmas tree. But the president also injected politics into that festive moment, warning about a bad Santa infiltrating the country. Take a listen.
Yeah, good.
has a tracker on him.
Well, we track Santa all over the world. We want to make sure that Santa is being good. Santa's a very good person. We want to make sure that he's not infiltrated, that we're not infiltrating into our country a bad Santa. So we found out that Santa is good. Santa loves you. Santa loves Oklahoma like I do. You know, Oklahoma was very good to me in the election, so I love Oklahoma. Don't ever leave Oklahoma, okay?
Now, Catholics and visitors gathered in Paris on Christmas Eve for a solemn mass at Notre-Dame, marking a powerful moment of return for the iconic cathedral. It's only the second Christmas service here since the landmark reopened earlier this month, following years of painstaking restoration. Notre-Dame was closed for more than 5 years after a devastating 2019 fire tore through its roof and spire, absolutely shocking the world. Now restored with the help of hundreds of millions in global donations, the cathedral is once again welcoming worshippers home. Meanwhile, astronauts aboard the International Space Station are spreading holiday cheer from orbit, sending a special Christmas message to people on Earth. The crew decorated the station with stockings by the airlock and even showcased a small Christmas tree during their festive greeting. Take a quick look.
Greetings to planet Earth, all of our friends and family from Expedition 74 aboard the International Space Station, flying high above, thinking of you during this holiday season. During this season, it's about spending time with family and friends and enjoying time together and reflecting on the year that we've just had. And what a great year it's been for us as astronauts aboard the Expedition 74 and previously Expedition 73. It's also a little bit sad because we're not with our families at the time. But actually we are. We're with our space family. So we're okay. And we're looking forward to spending the holidays together. And not just together up here aboard the space station, but all of our friends at the mission control centers across the planet in Houston and Huntsville and Munich and Moscow and Tsukuba, Japan. We're all going to celebrate the holidays together, and we're happy to share it with you.
A reminder of our top stories. US authorities find over 1 million new Jeffrey Epstein documents set for release in the coming weeks. The Kremlin reviews US-backed Ukraine peace plan as a Russian port suffers a drone attack. And Pope Leo celebrates Christmas Mass at St. Peter's Basilica and speaks out on Gaza's suffering. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. Merry Christmas from all of us here at Al Arabiya English. And, of course, happy holidays. And we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye. Once again, Merry Christmas and thank you for watching.